I feel like this is a film that's important to be made because just as an actor, I'm not often given the opportunity to tell the story of a woman that really experiences the entire spectrum of female or any human experience, you know?
Yeah. I know Blake also talked about not wanting to play Lily like a delicate flower. So how were you able to incorporate that into the writing?
Well, there were a lot of conversations early on before we cast. Honestly, before we even were at Sony, it was supposed to be a really small indie movie at Wayfair, and then Sony got involved later. Blake got cast, and it snowballed from there.
Hi, friends. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Thursday, April 3rd. Listen, Blake Lively has lost the narrative, or she's been dunked on. I mean, Jed Wallace dunked on her a couple weeks ago when he released a declaration, which basically stated that he did nothing. He posted nothing. He didn't direct anyone to post anything. He didn't like, comment, or direct anyone to like, comment. He didn't literally do anything but read what was happening online and relay it back to his team, i.e., Melissa Nathan, that everything was seemingly developing online an organic backlash against Blake and that they should just let it ride and try not to feed anything into it. And they didn't need he says that he did not do anything, that the backlash he witnessed was organic and there was nothing he recommended to them. Now, Blake believes that Jed played a vastly different role in this, and she filed her response to his motion to dismiss. And I noticed that there's like this blatant hole in her response that she doesn't acknowledge. Now, she doesn't have to acknowledge, right? Because her motion, she's responding to his motion to dismiss of her complaint, and she believes her complaint is the truth. But we know that her complaint, at least, is only one side of it. We also know that the text messages and the comments that she's pulling from Jen Abel and Melissa Nathan are only half of, not even half. They're like a comment of the truth, right? It's like taking someone's text thread and pulling out the worst statement they made, pulling it out of context and to prove your point. We've seen the text threads now between Melissa and Sarah and Melissa Nathan and Jen Abel, and we know that they're not planting stories. We know that they're reacting to Leslie Sloan planting a story at the Daily Mail, Blake Lively spouting off at the premiere that Ryan wrote the rooftop scene, and the online chatter about Blake not following Justin and Justin not being walking the premiere with everyone and Justin not being in the premiere and everyone unfollowing Justin, right? That was what was happening. And then everyone was reacting to how she was marketing the film and promoting her alcohol and her hair care line. And she can't accept that this is what happened. She wants to blame someone else. That's my opinion. Remove anything that might have happened on the set. Remove all of that. If Blake Lively would have just on the red carpet acknowledged the victims of domestic violence, opted not to use this opportunity to sell her liquor, market her hair care, and do all of this at the same time, things could have gone very differently, perhaps. But she doubles down and tries to continue to blame Jed Wallace. And the motion to dismiss response, it doesn't feel like a motion to dismiss response. Jed was filing for lack of jurisdiction, improper venue, that he didn't defame her, wasn't part of this. And instead of like really responding to his claims, she used this opportunity to again rewrite her narrative of what she thinks happened to her. And she made a big mistake. Listen to this. So, through tag defendants engaged Mr. Wallace and Street Relations in early August 2024, when the press and public were beginning to notice none of Baldoni's fellow cast members would be seen with him, which was on August 6th. That was the premiere of the film. Mr. Wallace and Street Relations got to work seeding, manipulating, and advancing disparaging content on social media platforms and internet chat forums, including specific platforms that Miss Abel told Mr. Baldoni would focus on Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram. Miss Abel emailed Miss Nathan and Mr. Wallace on August 8th saying that Miss Nathan and her tag team about Mr. Wallace and the Street Relations team, this is something you can bring them up to speed on so they can hit the ground running. You know, it's weird that she focuses on Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram because I don't know if she's aware, but a lot of the backlash against her literally started in Colleen Hoover's Facebook group. All she would have had to do is go into her cohort's Facebook group, and they would have seen that most of her fans were like, "What the flying F are you doing, Blake?" But she doesn't want to go to Facebook and acknowledge that Facebook was involved, I believe, because she knows she can't explain the cohort group. And that group has 200,000 people in it. So on August 9th, Miss Abel and Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath and Miss Nathan, and other members of the tag team exchanged text messages to celebrate the narrative that was shifting online to pointing a finger at Ryan being overly involved. In response to Mr. Baldoni, a tag employee noted that they had flagged to Jed and his team as well this shifting narrative. That same day, Miss Abel circulated a screenshot of a post of another woman accusing Mr. Baldoni of additional misconduct and announced that she directed Mr. Wallace to take action to suppress it, stating, "I'm assuming this is not true in the slightest. Either way, we've flagged to Jed and his team for more serious actions on the social side." The same day, Miss Nathan reported to the group Mr. Wallace sentiment that we are crushing it on Reddit. Around the same time, threads began to appear on Reddit speculating about a feud between Miss Lively and Mr. Baldoni. No, the feuds between these two was already in the media by this time, by the way. This was already big news. And do you know what happened on August 9th? She literally said that Ryan Reynolds wrote the rooftop scene. So she said Ryan wrote the rooftop scene. In fact, the headline on August 9th was Blake Lively on the iconic rooftop scene from It Ends With Us that Ryan Reynolds wrote, which screenwriter Christy Hall wasn't aware of. So the conversation that happened on August 9th had to do with the fact that literally Blake Lively was on the red carpet at the Ends With Us premiere, and she told Entertainment Tonight that her husband wrote the rooftop scene. That is why people started to talk about Ryan Reynolds being overly involved. Because why would Ryan Reynolds write the rooftop scene when there was already a screenwriter who had written this screenplay? So she's the one that brought Ryan into the conversation. No one else would have been talking about Ryan had she not opened her mouth. This is what had Sony sending an email to Wayfair being like, "Wait, what the hell? We don't have him under contract. Was he writing? If so, we need to get a contract with him ASAP," right? It also involved Christy having to respond to a flurry of press inquiries about Blake's statement that Ryan wrote that scene, even though Christy was the one that actually wrote the script. And when Christy was confronted, she said she only noticed a few slight changes. But no one would have talked about Ryan had Blake not brought it up. This is where you have to wonder, does she not realize that her own words became her biggest problem? So instead of saying that, instead of her acknowledging in any of her complaints that she's the one that put this into the orbit, she made people start talking about it. She lit the fire. And then when people started talking about, "Oh my God, why was Ryan doing that? That's weird. Why would Ryan insert himself into a film?" And then naturally it brings up tons of questions about why would he do that? And then the poor screenwriter is forced to respond to it. Sony is forced to react to it. And her error on August 9th, she's saying, she's trying to like deflect from what she did to say like, "No, Jed Wallace turned the entire narrative against me because of everything he was doing on Reddit." What? And the feud was happening online. The narrative about this feud had been going on for like a week. So why they're focused on the 9th, it's because Blake brought Ryan into the conversation and he started getting backlash. She was already getting backlash well before Mr. Jed Wallace entered the picture. And we know that it was Ryan that was telling the WME executives that Mr. Baldoni should not attend the premiere. It was Ryan that turned the cast against Baldoni. It was Ryan that was running around telling everyone that Baldoni was a sexual predator. And so the minute Ryan's name gets brought up, it wasn't anyone but Blake that brought his name into the conversation. And so instead of blaming his wife for leaking the truth, it's no, let's blame Jed Wallace for his untraceable smear campaign. And then she says on August 10th, TAG expressly acknowledged the success of Wallace Party's efforts to shift public attention from stories about Mr. Baldoni's conduct into manufactured and harmful narrative about Miss Lively, stated they started to see a shift on social due largely to Jed and his team's effort to shift the narrative towards shining a spotlight on Blake and Ryan. What? It was Blake on August 9th that said on the red carpet that her husband wrote that scene. Miss Nathan said, the majority of socials are so pro-Justin, I don't even agree with half of them. She later bragged that this went so well, it was genius. Over the days that followed, Mr. Wallace and Street Relations led a digital team that worked with Miss Nathan, Miss Abel, and TAG to further implement their social manipulation strategy. When an allegation resurfaced later that Mr. Baldoni had asked, this girl is claiming Justin invited her to his hotel room years ago, Miss Abel advised, let's chat with Jed on this as well. And then Mr. Baldoni's concerned that he did not want defending him. This is all part of her trying to argue that this has nothing to do with his motion to dismiss. Nothing. This is literally context of her regurgitating the complaint. Nothing else in here. She's not addressing any of what Jed has argued. In fact, her argument starts on page 10 and it goes until page 25. But 7 or 8 pages or 9 or whatever of this are just her retelling the story to remind everyone what happened. 10 pages of her regurgitating her entire complaint. If you remember the motion to dismiss response by Wayfair for Reynolds, you'll know that this did not happen. This wasn't a time for them to rehash all the details. And if you notice, she told on herself that she was upset that the shift of public attention from stories about Mr. Baldoni's misconduct into a manufactured and harmful narrative about Miss Lively, stating that they had seen a shift on social. Okay, so the shift from public attention, you mean the stories that were planted by Leslie Sloan and the smear campaign they were starting about Baldoni through her publicist and through Ryan Reynolds. And they got mad that it flipped on them organically because she opened her own mouth and because she was acting a fool while promoting the film. If you want to know the truth about what happened in all of those text messages, Mr. Baldoni has shared them. They're actually in what's called the timeline of relevant events. They actually include the email from Sony asking them to clarify about her statements. There's an email from Jamie to try to get, maybe let's try to change how we're marketing this. Maybe if we could just do a couple things, maybe it would help Blake. Why would Jamie go through the process of trying to suggest different options if he was after Blake? Doesn't make sense. So I wanted to see what were the headlines on August 9th when she says that everything started turning against her, which, by the way, didn't happen on the 9th. But here's a couple. It ends with a screenwriter reacts after Blake Lively says Ryan Reynolds rewrote scene. Another one. Justin Baldoni talks working with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and if they'll collaborate again. It wasn't a negative story. It ends with a screenwriter reacts to Blake Lively's reveal that Ryan Reynolds rewrote a scene. Screenwriter reacts to Blake Lively saying Ryan Reynolds wrote a scene in their film. When Ryan Reynolds was accused as horrifically mean and insecure by Deadpool co-star TJ Miller, he doesn't like me. Ryan Reynolds got another last word in on Chris Evans and Deadpool, and fans can't get enough. So Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds on working on each other's movies. Blake Lively says Ryan Reynolds secretly wrote It Ends with a Scene amid rumored drama. Lip Reader shares what Ryan Reynolds said to Blake Lively during tense conversation on the red carpet. Blake and Ryan Reynolds' egos are getting hard to ignore. Ryan Reynolds control freak. It's Ryan's way or the highway. Did Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni have a rift over It Ends With Us? Sleuthing TikTokers think so. This interesting one from In Touch is an exclusive, okay? And it says that Ryan Reynolds is one of Hollywood's biggest heavyweights. Now that Ryan owns a full-fledged multimedia marketing company that he's very proud of and that does good work, he can ask for a ton of power on his movie campaigns and can bring his own company full strength to the table when it comes to actually getting the word out about a movie. Okay. So it's bragging about his marketing company. It's a double-edged sword because often sidelining studio marketing executives who do this for a living and studio publicists with decades of experience. Ryan doesn't care, and once he secures control over a campaign, as he did with Deadpool and Wolverine this summer, it's Ryan's way or the highway. So he's the shot caller. He disregards what the studio executives and publicists say and does things the way that he wants them. They said Tom Cruise is the only other star who takes this much control of selling a movie. You can see how Ryan is patterning his strategy after Tom's. There's no mistaking when Tom is 100% behind a movie, and same is true with Ryan. What you'll almost never see either of them do is get behind a movie they're not starring in, and that's too bad. At the end of the day, they're always making it all about them. So he gets control of a marketing campaign and he believes that he does it so well and he won't listen to anyone else. So I'm sure when Jamie Heath was trying to recommend they shift how they talk about things on the red carpet or how they discuss things in the media when they're going on their press tours and they're promoting the film, I'm sure that went on deaf ears, right? I'm sure Ryan didn't want to hear that because it was his marketing campaign's strategy. This article has nothing to do with It Ends With Us. This is about Deadpool and Wolverine. So that didn't come from Justin's side. He was already getting criticism for some of the ways that he was handling not only the marketing of Deadpool and Wolverine, but also no one knew that he was the marketer for It Ends With Us. On August 8th, fans believe Ryan Reynolds is involved in the feud between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, probably because he's controlling, right? So Blake Reynolds, Blake Lively brings Ryan Reynolds into the conversation. Blake is the one that has her husband doing all of the filming for the promos. Ryan takes full control over the marketing and he doesn't want to hear the feedback from anyone else about it being negative, it not working. And so when Blake brings him into the conversation, it puts a spotlight on him. So naturally, the conversation around them changes, right? But what I think she's also ignoring very glaringly is that on August 9th, an article was published that Leslie Sloan directly leaked to the Daily Mail. And it was the disturbing truth behind why Blake Lively and her Ends With Us co-stars are feuding with Justin Baldoni. This is the article that got Stephanie Jones involved. This is the article that Leslie Sloan's planted about Justin Baldoni, right? These are the text messages we saw of her telling the reporter they had it all wrong about Blake. This is what an insider said, which I believe is Leslie. Justin Baldoni was chauvinistic and borderline abusive on the set of It Ends With Us. Tensions happened over his dismissive attitude to her input. So they're basically saying that tensions arose between Blake and Justin because he was dismissive of her input while they were filming scenes that involved abuse. Well, that's weird. So in August, they mentioned nothing about sexual harassment or sexual assault. And they say that Justin only focused on what he believed was the abusive male viewpoint, and it was a very chauvinistic approach to the topic. During scenes depicting abuse, Justin failed to consider Blake's character's perspective, instead focusing solely on what they believed was the abusive male's viewpoint. His approach was very chauvinistic, creating a tense atmosphere on set. The source claimed Justin was borderline abusive on set and said he almost became the character. Justin almost became the character in the sense that women on set felt he was borderline abusive to them and that he was unprofessional and unapologetic. Does that match his long-winded messages where he's apologizing to Blake? Directing a film so serious and so important about domestic abuse without allowing the woman to be included in the process is disturbing. And that he served as a director and producer and he failed to recognize both Blake and Colleen's roles as fellow producers and writers. And they said he took it very personally when the pair asked for some script rewrites. There is absolutely 0 times Colleen's name is mentioned in rewrites. In fact, they're completely ignoring the fact that Justin didn't even write the screenplay. So why would they think they needed to rewrite the screenplay? Justin didn't even write it to begin with. The entire screenplay was based upon Christy Hall adapting the book written by Colleen Hoover. But now Leslie is trying to bring Colleen into it and say, well, it was Colleen that wanted the rewrites. Without Colleen's book, none of this would have been possible. Parts of the film were rewritten under the instruction of Colleen. They had to be. He took their script decisions very personally, even though they weren't intended that way. Do you see any text messages between Justin and anyone where they're talking about Colleen? Was Colleen in the background pulling the strings, or is Blake trying to push this out on Colleen? They said things only got worse once he began to feel ganged up on by the women. His behavior extended beyond the main players. Once he felt ganged up on, he became even less empathetic. Now he's speaking praises likely out of fear that they'll call him out. He knows it's coming and he might try to blame his actions on being a method actor. So that's weird. They blamed him for being chauvinistic, not considering the woman's point of view, and the script had to be rewritten or else it would have failed. Doesn't that sound like something that Ryan Reynolds would say? Like if he doesn't write it, the film is going to fail. So there's nothing in here that there was sexual harassment or a hostile work environment. It was basically like Colleen forced us. We had to rewrite this for Colleen, which again feels like projection. But do you know when this was published? August 9th. So if Blake wants to say that everything shifted about her, this was August 9th. And Daily Mail published several pieces about his behavior on set, and so did TMZ and all these other outlets. Anytime during this period that Justin had the opportunity to speak about Blake, he never ever made her the bad guy, the villain. He didn't disparage her. Even when talking about complex personalities, he said, I'm a best idea wins person. I have been to a fault, sometimes to a point where at times I think I've had people wonder if I know what I'm doing or if I have a point of view because I'm so willing to have my vision changed. I don't believe that inspiration or creativity comes through one person. This proved to be a balancing act to avoid having his voice drowned out entirely. He said, you don't have to listen to everybody. And that didn't happen all the time. But there were just moments where I would get out of the way too much. He said, the last thing I wanted to do was to have a male gaze penetrate these very important moments that need to be told in a truthful way to represent all of the women that experience them every day. He credited Lively for her contribution. You can't summarize Blake's contribution in one sentence because her energy and imprint is all over the movie and really, really made all the film better. And from beginning to end, Ryan Reynolds was so generous. He's a creative genius, that guy. So you know his gift is levity and her gift is levity. Would he work with that duo again? If they'd have me. So he could have said a lot of things and disparaged them. He was being diplomatic and praising them for their help, which again tells me that had they not done this whole story never would have come out. Like we wouldn't have known how hard or challenging it was. He was willing to cover for her in order to keep the film successful. So then why would he say these things publicly and then privately try to destroy her? Blake cannot get out of her own way, right? She wants to blame Jed Wallace without any proof that he did anything. She wants to make this poor man in Texas take the fall and deal with her ego because she got bad press. And she's so out of her mind. I want you to hear something. The relative means of the parties. Mr. Wallace asserts that he perceives a disparity in financial mean between himself and Miss Lively. But even a genuine and substantiated disparity, such as a pro se individual plaintiff suing a corporation, is irrelevant, absent a showing that litigating in the forum would impose undue hardship. The Wallace party, they have produced nothing but beyond their conclusion assertions about his own perceptions, but the unsupported assertions of limited means and the allegations in the affidavit are insufficient to move the needle on this factor. She literally is saying that he's assuming that we are more wealthy than him and that he's not smart enough. And that's just his own conclusion. She has no sympathy for the fact that he has health issues, which would make it challenging for him to travel. She wants him to somehow know that the reason why he was helping was because she accused them of sexual harassment, which he did not know, and that he was supposed to know that this retaliation law existed. And so he should know that what he was doing was unlawful, even though he did not know. They are so scared of his actual declaration where he said, "No one told me about these claims. I was never brought up to speed about any of that. So I was a part of nothing." So her response is, "Well, you should have known." How would he have known if he did not know? Right? She cannot get around the fact that this one didn't happen and she has no case against Mr. Wallace. The only person seeding content to the public was Blake Lively. And she attempted to accuse him of being very abusive in that article on the Daily Mail through Leslie Sloan. And that article was what put this whole thing in motion. And then she's trying to blame Leslie's actions on Baldoni. Don't forget that in July, her husband was running around Hollywood calling Mr. Baldoni a sexual predator. Blake Lively believes that she's putting all of this on Jed, but yet has no evidence to prove that Jed did any of this because it's untraceable. So can you imagine literally saying that this man that's in Texas was casting her in a false light as to her marketing decisions, moral character, private life and family, starting threads of theories and seeding social media content on social chat sites like Reddit? He said he did nothing. How can he argue that their conduct was not extreme and outrageous? Well, because he said he didn't do it, right? He said he didn't do any of these things. All of this cycle of news led to online vitriol and violence in inundating Miss Lively. What violence did she get inundated with? What about the domestic violence victims that weren't heard by her? I would read you the full motion to dismiss response, but ultimately, what I got out of it is that Blake has no evidence against Jed Wallace. Nothing. All she has are text messages between people that say his name. She has communications from him, from relays of communications where he says, "We're killing it on Reddit." That's all. And that they might hook up on Signal and that Jamie and Jed spoke. She has no proof for anything other than using a proposal of what could be done if necessary, but was never implemented. And he said it was never implemented and wasn't necessary. He said it was because there was an organic backlash on the way she was marketing the film, not talking about domestic violence, and how she was promoting her own brand. He said his recommendation to them was to just let it ride. But she won't, she can't answer his declaration. So she has to just keep regurgitating the same claims she made while actually ignoring the fact that on August 9th, the day she claims that Mr. Wallace turned the internet against her, it was Blake Lively that inserted her husband into the conversation. It was Blake Lively who said, "My husband wrote the rooftop scene." It was Blake Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan, who planted a story at Daily Mail, who planted a story at TMZ, and who planted a story at the New York Post. And it was Justin's team that was in defense mode because all they were dealing with was the massive smear campaign that Blake and Ryan had started against him because Ryan wanted full control of the movie. And that's my opinion. What are your thoughts? Are these the biggest holes in her story, the biggest lies, the biggest mistakes? Tell me in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.